Hey everyone, and welcome back to TheScreeny. The Simpsons is definitely one of the most loved cartoons ever, and that's largely to do with Homer and his crackpot schemes. Not only is he a lovable dope, but if you delve further into his character, it soon becomes obvious that he's a raging criminal. Yet, somehow, he gets away with absolutely everything. Join us as we take a look at 10 times Homer should have been jailed. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos about your favorite movies and TV shows. Number 10. The Death of Maude Flanders. We all know that Homer isn't really a bad guy, he's just really stupid. Sometimes his actions only cause hilarious disruptions, but on this occasion, he inadvertently killed off one of the supporting characters. In Alone Again Natural Diddly, both the Flanders and the Simpsons enjoy a day out at the racetrack with their families. Ned, ever the safety-conscious squirrel, takes a shine to the protective equipment, while his other half decides to take a walk in the fresh air to laugh at the poor people in the crowd. That's not very Christian, is it, Maude? But it wasn't the Almighty that struck her down, it was a wayward shot from a t-shirt cannon, and it's all Homer's fault. The big guy gets excited by the cheerleaders and their novelty gun and decides to paint a target on his stomach so that he can grab one of the t-shirts. All goes smoothly until Homer ducks at the last second and the t-shirt hits poor Maude right in the head, knocking her down from the bleachers and killing her instantly.
My lord, she's dead!
Simpsons should have been on reckless endangerment charges at least. Number 9. Drunk driver disaster. What's the worst possible thing that a cartoon spouse can do to another cartoon spouse? Frame them for drunk driving. Well, in Homer's case, it was just one of the deplorable things that he's done to the long-suffering Marge and their union. Simpsons fans will recall that Marge has an addictive personality. She's been addicted to gambling previously, but also had issues with alcohol too. In Codependence Day, Marge gets a little too buzzed a little too often and realizes she needs to ditch the booze for good. Of course, Homer doesn't really cope with that too well, and the pair get hammered at an Oktoberfest celebration. Homer is so buzzed that he decides to drive home and ends up totaling the car. When the police arrive, he shifts the blame onto Marge, who gets sent to the slammer for driving under the influence. The mom of 3 checks herself into rehab while Homer gets off scot-free. Even when his wife finds out about his terrible lie, she forgives him and lets him carry on drinking. Does anyone else feel like this marriage isn't really great after all? Number 8. Blundering bigamist. Correct us if we're wrong, but US law prevents men from having more than one wife, right? Some states will press criminal charges against you for being stupid enough to do that, but apparently in Springfield, everyone just laughs it off. In Viva Ned Flanders, Homer and Flanders go on a trip to Vegas to try and give Ned a little time off from being so uptight. Both of the guys get a little wild and end up marrying their waitresses in a drunken stupor. At the time, the two up and leave back to their wives in Springfield, and the incident isn't mentioned again until 3 seasons later when Amber and Ginger track their husbands down. The judges refuse to annul the marriages, and Homer coerces Amber into getting drunk enough to marry Grandpa. When she sobers up and realizes what's happened, she makes a swift exit. There's so much legally wrong here that Homer should get a life sentence.
Oh, I lost another wife. Well, it hurts now, but the senility will take care of that. There she goes.
Number 7. Neglecting the elderly. Let's face it, when it comes to looking after his dad, Homer isn't really the best on the planet. Does he love him? Absolutely, but he's too stupid to show it. In Season 10, the Simpsons take a trip together as a family to a run-down ghost town. Homer wants to leave Abe at home, but is forced to take him along for the ride. The day passes without incident, and Homer wants to get back to Springfield as quickly as he can, so puts a ban on bathroom breaks. Abe, being a little older, really needs to go, but Homer refuses to stop. As a result, Grandpa's kidneys explode, and he needs a transplant ASAP. That's definite neglect of the elderly right there. Poor Grandpa. What's more, Homer skips out on donating his own kidney to save his dad and only gives it up when he returns to Springfield and gets hit by a car, knocking him out so Dr. Hibbert can do the surgery. Way to go, Homer.
You butcher! Give it back! Give me that!
Come on!
Number 6. International terrorism. Out of all of the arrestable offenses on this list, this venture would probably get Homer the most time in the slammer. Homer has had many different jobs, including working for Hank Scorpio, a villain that would put Dr. No to shame. Of course, everyone but Homer realized that his boss was a really bad guy. Homer was none the wiser and continued to work for the deplorable character who plans to take over the world. The buffoon even captures the good guy and delivers him directly to Scorpio's goons who plan to slice him to death with a laser beam. As for the rest of the Simpson clan, Bart, Marge, Maggie, and Lisa all live with Homer in Scorpio's compound, and they're utterly miserable. Luckily for them, Scorpio eventually allows the family to go back to Springfield and resume their everyday lives, but only once Homer has helped him take over the East Coast. So add terrorist to Homie's rap sheet, and let's move on.
Hey, Homer! You're missing out on some fun!
Hey, you little... joke's on me, is it?
Number 5. Child cruelty. It's a wonder that The Simpsons have been able to get away with this for so many years, but when you really think about it, Homer strangling Bart is child abuse. Homer with his hands clasped tight around Bart's neck shouting, "Why you little," is probably one of the most recognizable catchphrases from the series. But in real life, it could get Homer locked up for a really long time. Homer has done it so many times that we've lost count, but it comes to a head when Homer visits a therapist in season 22. Dr. Xander, voiced by Ant-Man himself Paul Rudd, tries to put a stop to the frequent strangling, but it doesn't seem to last very long. Homer loses all control over Bart, who continues to run wild around the town doing whatever the heck he likes. When Marge brings Bart to the therapist to try and curb his behavior, Dr. Xander gets so irritated by him that he ends up strangling him himself. The treatment didn't have a long-standing effect on Homer though, who was back to his old violent habits within a couple of episodes. Number 4. Trigger Happy Pappy. The Simpsons is pretty good at tackling some big issues under the guise of comedy, and given the controversy that surrounds guns in America, it's hardly surprising that they've taken aim at the subject a couple of times. In Season 9, the Cartridge Family episode shows just how stupid and ignorant Homer can be. He gets a gun, despite Marge not wanting him to, and treats it like a toy. But here's the illegal part. He promises to let Bart use the gun to chase a security guard if he tidies his room. Wow. That's supplying a minor with some pretty impressive weaponry. Not to mention the multiple times that Homer waves it around, loaded, and points it at Marge while talking to her. He doesn't know where the safety is and keeps accidentally firing it, before storing it in the fridge for Milhouse and Bart to find and play games with. How many times have we all heard awful stories about kids playing with guns in the news? Sure, he's a cartoon, but he ought to at least get a visit from Chief Wiggum over this one. Perhaps a hefty fine and some rehabilitation training wouldn't go amiss either. Number 3. Business sabotage. No one grinds Homer's gears quite like his neighborino, Ned Flanders. The two are polar opposites, with Ned being devoutly Christian and straight-laced. Although you could argue that they have a love-hate relationship, in the early seasons it was pretty much all hate. In Season 3, Ned declares his plans to open up a store that sells just left-handed products for left-handed people. Bitter, Homer makes a wish on a wishbone, hoping that the business will fail. And it does. The Leftorium isn't getting the business that Ned thought it would, and when Homer notices potential customers, he purposely doesn't point them in Flanders' direction. The Flanders soon end up destitute and are forced to sell all of their stuff for a bargain price just so they can survive. Homer later feels guilty and tries his best to save Ned from losing everything. Homer might not have done anything legally wrong in this instance, but he definitely should repent for his mortal sins. Number 2. Cold-blooded murder. The Halloween episodes are always a chance for creators to go completely off the deep end with their stories, so we can't really say that this is what Homer would do in reality, but it still counts. In Treehouse of Horror 5's The Shining parody, Homie turns into a crazed madman who chases his family all over the house, trying to kill them with an axe. Very Jack Nicholson.
Here's Johnny! Down!
But fast forward to 2009 and they're taking on the super successful series Mad Men. Based on advertising and getting to the very top, Homer somehow ends up as a hitman for an ads agency, targeting the rich and famous for large amounts of cash. Some of his targets were really high ends too, including George Clooney, who was drowned in cement, Prince, who was beaten to death by his own instrument, and Neil Armstrong, who got a golf club to the brain. Of course, it's all forgotten about in the normal episodes. Number 1. Homer the Bomber. When Springfield is split into 2 area codes, one for the rich and one for the poor, Homer gets so annoyed that he decides to take matters into his own hands in the worst way possible. At a town meeting to discuss the situation, he employs his son to wire a bomb and detonates it at City Hall to try and stop the separation. Luckily, the bomb isn't made correctly and doesn't go off, thus saving countless lives, and Homer remains just an idiot and not a mass murderer. The crackpot scheme obviously doesn't go to plan, and Homer berates Bart for his crappy bomb-making skills. What's the going rate for this type of terrorism these days? 10 years? 20? How is this menace in society still roaming the paths of Springfield?
Oh yeah? They think they're better than us, huh?
Thank you very much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and don't forget to check out one of the other 2 videos on your screen.